Welcome to the Hey Rhona podcast. Let's talk life and leadership. Each week, Rhona talks with high-capacity leaders about how their hardest seasons shape the way they lead and love today. We often keep struggles in the shadows while we lead, but those stories, they shape us. Our goal is to look back and see how we were shaped in the struggle. It's time to ask, what actually grew when life felt dark? Welcome to the conversation.
I can remember being in high school and thinking that I would have my whole entire life figured out by my 20s, have all my ducks in a row by 30. But I was a semester out from graduating and realized, wait a second, you don't just apply for a job as a speaker. So what the heck am I going to do if I no longer filled my plate to capacity with so many yeses? Because that was something that I was so guilty of in my effort to people please and perform to, if you are willing to just be courageous and transparent. You never know what someone is going through next to you who might need to hear your story, but also you never know who might be standing in your presence that may be a resource for you if you are willing to share the struggle that you're in. And you are meant to change the world that you are in. We may not be able to change the whole world, but we can make a difference in the world that we are in.
Hey, it's Rhona. Today I'm talking with Erin. She's sharing her story and how seasons of loss and transition unexpectedly prepared her for the seasons to come. Welcome to the conversation.
I'm so glad to have you here today and just dive into your story and learn more about the journey that you've been on in life. It's walking into spaces and speaking to people all over the United States, and you're an executive coach also. I would love for you to just share a little bit with us about what your life looks like daily and how that kind of flows for you. But then let's go back and kind of walk through some seasons of life that have shaped you, and you walk in a really special grace. And I know that doesn't come easy, especially when we go through difficult seasons in life. Sometimes that takes extra work. So let's start with you just sharing, where you're at right now in leadership and the way you're helping others.
Yeah, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. It's such an honor, and I'm so proud of the work that you're doing. So I'm just thrilled to get to be here. I would say that my day-to-day life probably does not look like I get to do fun things sometimes, but most of the time I'm just an Uber driver for my kids and flipping pancakes and, folding laundry. But what I've learned, or I've been trying to learn over the last several years, is to really navigate the balance of being a mom who is close to home and really pouring into my kids and my husband, while also remembering to fan the flame that has been burning inside of me for years. And remember that God has created me for a purpose, and beyond mom and wife, I'm still Erin with dreams and hopes and goals and a story to tell. And so I've been really fortunate and grateful that over the last couple of years, God has opened some really cool doors for me to get to do that through my speaking, my coaching, and my book, and just getting to pour into people. That's my absolute favorite thing. It's so funny because I can remember being in high school and thinking that I would have my whole entire life figured out by my 20s. I was going to be married, and then I was going to have my kids 22, 24, 26, 28, and then be done, and then just have all my ducks in a row by 30. And I just recently turned 40, and I'm still okay, what am I going to do when I grow up? Trying to figure it all out. But I think when I was 14 years old, I was in high school, and I had a dear friend, a mentor of mine, who actually died by suicide. And that circumstance really brought about something in me where I knew that I wanted to reach people. I wanted to impact people. My thinking was, if I could show people that there was a hope before they were hopeless, then I could maybe make a change for the better.
Yeah.
And that began a path for me where I knew that I wanted to speak. I knew that I wanted to impact people. And so that was all I ever said. I wanted to be a speaker. I wanted to be a speaker. This was, however, in the early 2000s, before social media. I mean, the internet was alive and well, but it wasn't like it is today. And so I went to college saying I wanted to be a speaker. I got a degree in communications, but I was a semester out from graduating and realized, wait a second, you don't just apply for a job as a speaker. So what the heck am I going to do with this degree? I have no idea. And so there were several people in my life who had gone on to kind of go back to school and become a teacher. And I thought, if I could do anything, I think that would be a great place to start. And in a way, I'm still speaking, I'm still impacting people. I've got a captive audience for 9 months that I can just pour
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I graduated with my degree in communications and then immediately started again to acquire my certification to teach and get a secondary degree in education. And so I spent a little over a decade in the classroom as a teacher, and I kind of considered myself an undercover motivator. I liked to teach them English and literature, but really it was more important to me that they left with character development and learning how to be good people and really just prepared for that next phase of life. And so, in many ways, I am back full circle to getting to speak, but all those years of teaching has prepared me in so many ways as well. So, kind of doing what I always thought I would do. It just did not look a thing like I thought it would look.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it happens so much. And when you said that, like about turning 40 and not knowing where you're going to go, I've had so many people, as I've asked people to get on the podcast, they're like, I don't know. I'm in this season right now where I don't understand what's going on in my life. I've already done a lot
Yes.
of what I thought I would do, and now I'm just stuck and I'm fixing to turn 40, or I just turned 40. And I'm like, hey, this is like a theme. So I think we have to dive into it.
Yes.
But it
Yes.
is
For
so.
sure.
Did you have a period like between teaching and then transitioning into speaking and writing your book, or did it kind of like overlap, or how was that? Did you transition into something else for a season? What was that like?
Well, I like to say that I retired from teaching 3 times. The first time I retired because we had our third son. And so then I was staying home with babies
Okay.
and then got back into the classroom for a bit, retired again when my husband opened a restaurant and needed me to assist in some of the back end things that he was working on. And so I got out of teaching to help him with that. But then I felt like God kind of tricked me because once I got out, I thought, wait, there's not as much for me to do as I thought there was going to be in the restaurant. And so that sort of led to a season of me being totally open in a way that I never was before. My kids were all in school. I needed to help with the restaurant some, but I wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. And so I really was sort of face to face with, what do I want to do for the first time in probably my whole adult life? I had just been so busy being a wife and a mom and surviving in the trenches of toddlerhood and all of those things that was really the first time in my life that I was able to breathe for a second and say, wait, there's been things that I've wanted to do for a really long time as well. And so that's when I began my podcast. I began working on my book. And by that point, I had known for many years that I wanted to write a book, but I don't think the story was fully written yet. And so it really took some time. It took me living through some life and some circumstances to land in a place where I felt like there was a story to be told.
Yeah. And your podcast and your book kind of go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
The overall theme and the concept of what you're diving into. I guess, do you have anything like in those seasons? I don't know where you want to go with it and how you want to talk about it, but is there a specific area as you've gone on this journey through life that has really shaped where you're at today? I know you mentioned your book and your podcast, there was a lot of life that had to be lived there. Do you mind to dive into some of that and explain to us how those difficult seasons kind of shaped and got you to where you are today and help shape that story for others?
Yeah. So at the end of 2016, my husband and I lost our fourth son in early labor. And almost immediately after that, just in the couple of weeks after we were navigating that loss, I felt like God said, this is where your book is going to come from. And I remember just being in such devastating loss and looking at my husband and just kind of saying, what do I do with that? I don't think there's a story that's even written yet. I don't know how I'm supposed to talk about this. All I could see was the pain in front of me and the hurt that I was walking through. I knew that God was good. That was kind of my mantra through it all, that this isn't good, but I know that God is good. And so I really held on to that through that whole season. But that really began the turning of the tides in our family, where God moved us out of state from a life that we had known into a very different life. And we began shaping things in that season of our life that were very different than anything that we had walked through before. What that season did for me was that I felt as though in my loss and in my grief, all of these knots that had been buried inside of me for a really long time began rising to the surface, and they were begging to be untangled.
Mm.
And I say that my grief really helped me in losing my son, I was able to find myself. And I think that it's difficult for people to kind of wrap their brains around sometimes the negative things that we go through having a positive impact on our lives. But I have always believed that to be the case, and that proved itself to be true in that situation. For me, I think it was probably during the season of quarantine, which was 4 years after we had lost our son. But by that point, we had moved to a new state. We were navigating this new life and, kind of settling into what was a new normal when things were then no longer normal. But for months of being quarantined, I was really just welcome to no longer be trapped in the performance mentality that I had had my whole entire life. And I could just kind of be. We live out in the middle of the woods here in Texas. And so I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to please anyone. I was simply just a girl in the middle of the woods with her family and kind of free for the first time to break the chains of trying to live up to everybody else's expectations or worrying about everybody else's opinions, like simple little things like just not wearing makeup. Like it seems so silly, but I've always been the kind of person that just always wanted to look like I had it all together. And that was the first time in my life I can remember it just didn't really matter. Like the things that mattered most began to rise to the surface, and the things that didn't began to fall away. And somewhere in that, I began to find myself in a really special way.
That's really cool.
That season of grief didn't feel as strong. Grief has no timeline, and we kind of bounce through it, and waves come as we live our lives, no matter how long it's been.
Yeah.
But it had always been tied to that moment in time when I lost our son, Jacob. It's like everything before that felt like rubble, like my whole life had exploded and everything ahead looked so strange and different. And it was really out of that grief that I began walking towards the person that I am today, or the person that I'm still evolving into. But I would say that in that time of quarantine, what really began to happen for me was that I began to dream in a way that I had never dreamed before. I felt the mental space and the margin to be able to consider what life could look like if I simply had the confidence to step into it. If I quit worrying about other people's expectations, if I no longer filled my plate to capacity with so many yeses, because that was something that I was so guilty of in my effort to people please and perform to get affirmation, then suddenly I look at my calendar and I look at my plate and I'm just overwhelmed with so many things, and some of them good things. But it was really a place where I was able to create margin for myself and realize, okay, what actually were you created to do instead of just what you feel like you should be doing? And so I was finally, for the first time, able to kind of step out of obligation and into purpose.
That's awesome. And what are some things that you did in that season that helped you navigate and decide what mattered most to you? Or like, did you just look back at things you had loved before and kind of like, this has always been in my heart and I've never done it? Or were there some specific, maybe books that you read or times of prayer? Was there something specific that really shaped and gave you clarity as how to take those next steps?
I think it was really interesting because it was a lot of fundamental, rudimentary things that kind of brought me back to a place of grounding. And so for me, it was slow breakfasts every morning. It was coffee on the front porch. It was spending the days with my kids, watching them fish in our pond, or just simple, mundane tasks that I had never taken the time to enjoy because I was always so busy with so many other things. And then it was evening dinners that we never really had time for, but now we're all home with nothing to do. And so we're able to just sit outside until the fireflies chase us inside and just get to spend time as a family. And then, as silly as it sounds, I have always had the absolute blackest thumb on the planet. I have no luck with anything green whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I just began looking at this specific corner of our property and dreaming about a garden and planting a garden. And I kind of sketched some things up and showed my husband what I was thinking of. And for me, it was probably much more about just the beauty and the aesthetic of it than it was, making a cucumber or whatever. But we began working on that as a family. And there were so many lessons in that garden. There still continue to be lessons in that garden today of just getting dirty, of putting everything else aside, of not being stuck on our screens or in our phones, but working together toward a common goal and slowing down. I think that was really when the message of slowing down began to really birth in my life and taking the time for first things first and doing what mattered most.
Awesome. That's so good. It's so interesting how just when our minds are at peace, we start to gain that clarity and it
Absolutely.
changes everything. So now let's go from there to where you are today. What are some steps that happen in that process of you learning to really value what matters most and your story coming together to now write the book and then to be able to reach out and begin speaking to other people? What was that journey like? And what was your mindset? Like maybe even some limiting beliefs during that season that you had to wrestle with to get through in order to really step into this season and everything that God had for you?
Yeah. So I have to credit a lot of it to my husband pushing me and just being so kind and so patient to make me believe in myself in a way that I was probably not willing to believe in myself. Coming from a business background, our family has always been in business. My husband is an entrepreneur at heart, it's in his blood. And so in my brain, you invest money and then you should immediately see the return of that money. Otherwise, it's not a wise investment, right? And it doesn't always work like that in the creative space, which is really difficult to kind of overcome because you can't just say, I mean, you can, but you can't just say, I'm a speaker and a writer. And now you have a thriving business as a speaker and a writer. Sometimes it takes years of traction to maybe ever see any return on that investment. And so I had a really hard time taking it seriously because I'm not bringing any money back in immediately. And so this doesn't count is
Yeah.
kind of the mindset that I had to overcome. And it all started, I had been writing on a blog for years, literally 10 years. And we had a friend who came into our offices one day and said, Hey, I read your blog that you wrote. And I looked back and I saw that you'd been doing it at that time, I think for, I don't know, 8 years or something. That's amazing. And when he walked out with tears in my eyes, I looked at my husband and I said, It's not amazing, it's sad. And he kind of was taken aback by that comment. And I said, I've been doing this for 8 years and I've never had the courage to take it a step further. Like, when am I going to finally step into what I know I've been called to do?
Yeah.
And so shortly after that, I found a writing conference and I showed my husband and I said, This is on my bucket list of something that I would like to do. But it was a significant investment. And there again, I thought, I don't know that it's worth me investing in this and in myself. And immediately he looked at me and said, I want you to sign up. I want you to go. And that was probably the first moment of me taking a step towards doing what I had always been called to do, and went there, was so encouraged, met so many like-minded people, was poured into in a way that I had probably never been poured into in my whole life. And that just led to the next thing, which led to the next thing, which led to the next thing. And I think that life is a lot like that. When we can have the courage to take one small, tiny step of faith, have one brave moment of courage, then that leads to the next step and the next step and the next step. And that consistency builds and that momentum builds in a way that maybe we never would have anticipated, but we have to be willing to take that one first step.
And I totally identify with that as an artist and creative. It's so hard to compare like what you're doing in the moment to the financial return. And
Yeah.
something I've been thinking about a lot is just how we can look at our ROI like in all different ways. So sometimes it's the relationships we're building, like you just mentioned. Sometimes it's the people that we're impacting, and we can get really specific on how we can find that return on what we're investing into. What were some things for you? Like, it may be at the point where it is a financial return now, but in that process, what were some things that you could identify that kept you motivated and moving forward that maybe weren't financial returns immediately, but what were some things other than the relationships that you met once you made that investment? What are some other things that have kept you moving through the years?
I think for me, it's always been extremely difficult to be transparent. I mentioned earlier that I've always kind of wanted to be, she's got it all together, like everything, she's got her ducks in a row. Life is wonderful. And the reality is that life is not always wonderful and the ducks are not always running in a row. I mean, oftentimes they're crazy and chaotic. And I found that the more that I was willing to be transparent, the more I began to see people all around me nodding their heads saying, Yeah, me too. Me too. And even if our stories weren't the same, there were commonalities within our stories that began to bring a community together. And I've learned that transparency builds community. And for me, that has been the ball that has continued to keep me rolling because it is so important when we find people who are resonating with our stories, who reach out and say, thank you for sharing that. I've never talked about that, but I went through this, or I've felt this way, or, something that reminds us that even if we don't see a dollar sign, the work that we're doing matters. And I think it's so important to keep that focus. And I get it. We have to also put groceries on the table, right? But we have to be willing to look for those moments of impact that truly are making a difference when the seasons feel hard and we don't feel like what we're doing matters. It matters more than you know. And transparency builds community if you are willing to just be courageous and transparent.
Those seasons of growth and pushing through into other areas, the relationships can really fuel that satisfaction. I love that. I have one question I like to ask everybody. What is your big message to the world? Like,
I think that something that I strive for in every conversation that I have, in every interaction that I'm in, I see it in the nature of my home is that I want people to know that they are safe in my presence. I want to be a place of peace. I want to be someone who reminds people that their story matters. And so often I have found people say, oh, but I could never tell my story because it's not as big of a story as someone else's. And that's simply not the case. We all have such an incredible story to tell, and there are people who need to hear your story. And wherever you are in your life, you are put in the position that you are in for a specific reason, and you are meant to change the world that you are in. We may not be able to change the whole world, but we can make a difference in the world that we are in. And so I hope that everywhere that I go, I am just a place of peace and calm for people that reminds them that they matter and that their story matters and that they have an incredible gift. I hope that I can help people find their purpose and live on purpose because I think that's so important.
like you were saying earlier, you like to present yourself in a way that you have it all together, but you're going through something inside. And so I feel like we see that over and over, especially when we're going through complicated seasons, that we want to make sure that everyone has a safe place because most of us are trying to go out and act like we have it all together, but we have stuff inside and rarely do we have space that we feel comfortable enough to share those things. So it's
Right.
super cool to see how that connects with what you've been through. Do you have any specific resources if someone is like you and maybe they're looking at transitioning from something that they're doing to pursue something they're more passionate about, or maybe they're walking through grief and just looking for next steps? Were there some resources that you found in your journey that were really helpful for you that you could share?
I think there are two things and probably pretty simplistic, but the first is, we live in such a time where there is so much information at our fingertips. And I have found, as silly as it sounds, Google to be such an incredible resource to lead me in the direction that I need to go.
Yeah.
And so, whatever questions you are asking, I bet there's a resource for you to find it. If you simply, sometimes precious Google must think it's my journal because whatever question is top of mind, that's what I'm searching for. But what I've found is that it has led me to the podcast I needed to hear, or the book I needed to read, or the conference I needed to be at. And I think that that has been, just the roadmap that has led me to the next step and the next step. It's never too silly to Google, which is, probably not the best advice, but it's worked for me.
Yeah.
And then, second to that, I would say don't underestimate the importance of people in your life. And I'm very introverted. I was always a person who thought I didn't need other people. And what I've found over the last several years is that when we are able to connect with other people, that truly makes all the difference in the world. Because I guess there's a caveat to that, which would be not only connect with other people, but be willing to tell our story. You never know what someone is going through next to you who might need to hear your story, but also you never know who might be standing in your presence that may be a resource for you if you are willing to share the struggle that you're in. And, I've also tried very hard to be confident and brave enough to step into places that maybe I felt like I didn't belong because I felt inadequate. But it's only when we surround ourselves by other people who are advancing beyond us that we're able to also advance.
Mm.
And so I think the combination of those two things, being strategic in a way that's not slimy, about putting yourself around other people And also just being willing to search out the resources that you need. Either one of those things is a great place to start in taking a next step.
That's awesome. I just heard I was listening to something on leadership this week, and they were talking about that, the importance of networking, but not in that slimy way where you're trying to just like connect with people because of what you want to take from them, but instead looking for people that you can connect with because of what they're going to add to your life in your own character and in your own growth and development, because the more you're surrounding yourself with them, the more you're going to grow into their ways, but more that you're following them to learn from them versus trying to like up the ladder of networking. And I feel like kind of like a yucky connotation that you're just trying to get something from people versus getting into the right spaces to really create the right atmosphere for you to grow and become everything that God's placed inside of you. So
I think something that has helped me with that as well is to remember that there are people who are ahead of me, but I am also ahead of other people. And so I'm always really trying to, yes, put myself in the presence of people who are going to help me grow, but also never forget to help the people behind me grow as well. And one of the most interesting things that I think I've heard in this journey has been, so often we think we need to be an expert to teach on something or to make an impact, but really we just need to be a little bit further up the road. And so you're looking for people who are a little bit further up the road to follow behind, but don't ever forget to reach behind a hand to those who are just a little bit behind you down the road and bring them along with you as well. And I think that for me helped to remove some of the ickiness of networking, to know, yes, I'm reaching my hand ahead to grow through other people, but also I want to give back to those people who might be walking behind as well.
And for anybody who's wanting to look into your book or find you on social media, your podcast, can you give them your information?
Yeah. So my website is erincuccio.com, and also my Instagram is Erin Cuccio. So pretty simple to find me. I love getting to connect with people there. And so would love it if you would give me a follow, check out the book on my website, but that'll be the place to find all things.
Do you ever feel like personal development isn't getting to the root? Primal Question Coaching takes a different approach. Take Rhona's free Primal Question Assessment at heyrhona.com and join our free monthly call, both linked in the show notes. If you're struggling, reach out to a friend, find a therapist, or connect with Rhona at hey.rhona. If you've enjoyed listening, share it and leave a 5-star review. Rhona reads everyone. Until next time, cheers to hope and healing.